going on, my people, my people, my people? It is your boy, Michael Anthony, here with the first episode of the Generational Impact Live Show. I am so excited to be doing this. I'm excited that you guys are here, and I can't wait to get to material. And I know some of you guys have seen some information about the Generational Impact Project online, or maybe you're signed up to our newsletter, which is the Generational Impact Journal. But if this is the first time you're engaging with us, thank you. This episode here is to kind of go over what the Generational Impact Project is and what our intentions with it is going to be. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right on in. With this, we're going to be bringing on some additional colleagues and subject matter experts and people to really engage in this conversation that we're about to discuss right now. So let's go ahead and get right to it. So let me go ahead and pull up the presentation. There we go. So Generational Impact Project, it is to build wealth, heal trauma, and creating legacy. We are also fiscally sponsored by Webb's Training Center. They're a nonprofit organization based out of Northern Virginia, but covers the entire Washington, D.C. metro area. If you'd like to find out more information about them, please check the show notes so then you can engage with them and see what sort of resources they have for you. So moving on to my next slide. So the thesis. What is the Generational Impact Project? Simply, in order for Black African Americans to build generational wealth, it has to start with healing from generational trauma. I know some of you out there get that and understand that. There's been a lot of conversation around generational wealth within the community, particularly the Black community, podcasts, TV shows, seminars, conferences, different things like that. And that's not to really compete with any of those great and wonderful programming that they have out there. This is more so of a companion piece with some of the material that you guys have been engaging with since then. So let me go ahead and let's just make sure that we are talking the same language. Right before I go any further, let me go ahead and get this to full screen so then you guys can see this a little bit better. So what I want to go through is what are the definitions of generational wealth as well as generational trauma. It's better for us to understand what these things are, so then everything that I'm speaking about from here on out, you have a good understanding of what that is. So generational wealth is what gets passed down: assets, knowledge, opportunity. Generational trauma, in contrast, is also what gets passed down, but it's wounds, patterns, survival responses, right? Now, most programs maybe focus on one of these things. Either it's the generational wealth or the financial literacy portion, or it's the well-being or trauma healing portion. Well, what we do here is that we're doing both at the same time in the same room. So that's what brings us to the Generational Impact Project. So it's a community-based initiative, informed healing with practical financial education and legacy planning for Black adults and families in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area for now. Now, this is a program that we will definitely be deploying in other cities and other states. But right now, because this is the first sort of program that we're putting together, we're going to focus in on the Washington, D.C. metro area. That's where I currently reside. And a lot of my colleagues and people who were engaging in this project also are in this area. And essentially, we base it off of some of this framework that we have. So what are we doing? So we are unlearning what we inherited that no longer serves us. We're reclaiming ownership of our financial lives and our stories, and rebuilding with real tools, real plans, and real accountability. So now that you know what we believe and how we work, let me show you why exactly this program matters and why we're doing it. Okay, now, before we get into the data, some of the history and things that some of you guys are already familiar with, I just want you to pay attention to this right here. Now, this is called ancestral mathematics. So in order for you to be born, you needed two people. Okay. Now, out of those two people, which are your parents, you had four grandparents, both two on your father's side and then two on your mother's side. Now, with your grandparents and those four people, then you have your 8 great grandparents. Okay. And then it just continues to go across in that nature. So then let me go ahead and make this bigger for you guys, because these words on this particular page is a little bit small. So I want to make sure everybody can read this. So across 12 generational levels, including you, this represents 4,094 theoretical ancestors across 11 generations, right? And this is before you. Now, we do have this thing right here called the pedigree collapse, right? Now, what the pedigree collapse is it essentially means that when you have people who are of the same bloodline or family, for example, if you have first cousins who happen to have a child together, then the mathematics sort of changes, because your first cousins would have the same grandparents. So that means their children would also have some of the same grandparents. And that is just something that happened throughout history. So this is theoretical as far as if people were to have children with people that they are not related to. So we do have to make this count and make this into our equation, because of course, if some of you have seen this ancestral map up here online, definitely something that went viral. And one of the questions that it talked about right here, down below, right here, if you can see my cursor, is how many struggles, how many battles, how much sadness, how much happiness, and how many love stories, how many expressions of hope for the future had to occur for you to exist in this present moment. And the conclusion is there was a whole lot of people throughout our history as humans got you here. And we're right now just looking at 12 generations and the 4,094 people it took for you to even be here watching me. And of course, that continues on if you happen to have children, or if you happen to have grandchildren, right? Then that's another generation, which then moves you into the parent or the grandparent. And some of you guys are blessed enough to even be great grandparents. And so those generations, but then even if you look at yourself, then going further back, where does your ancestral math go? So now let's go into the one life for 4 centuries. So what does the ancestral math look like for someone the age of 45 years old in 2026? Meaning that this individual was born around 1980 to 1981. Okay. Now we're using an illustrative, parent to child generational interval of approximately 30 years. And that is traditionally, or at least what the data says, that when people have children, women are roughly around 25 to 27, men are around 30 to 32. So we're kind of using an average of the ages of whenever humans start having children. So using that as sort of the generational intervals of like our generations going back, we can kind of look at it down here. So if we were to go back 4 generations, hold on, let me go ahead and adjust this. There we go. Here we go. Okay. So if we were to go back 4 generations, right, that would place your ancestors around 1865. So that would be actually your second great grandparents. So that means the family reached the generation living towards the end of slavery would be your second great grandparents. Again, this is based off of somebody who's 45 years old today. Now, if we go back down here where it says the 7 generations, so then on your 5th great grandparents, your family would have been around 1776. Of course, we just celebrated our 250th anniversary of America this year. So that means in your 5th great grandparents, your ancestors would have been, your 7 generations back, your 5th great grandparents around the birth of the United States with the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And then if we go back 12 generations back, this will place them around 1619. So that'd be your 10th great grandparents. The family line reaches the early colonial period and the first documented arrival of Africans in English Virginia. Now, this could be measured by centuries, but, obviously when we're looking at this as far as the dates, things like that. And remember, if I go back to this last one, so if we go back to your 10th great grandparents, looking at the ancestral map again, then that would put us at the 4,094 humans. It's a lot of people that brought you here, depending, of course, on your age, that went through this time of American society. So now let's take a look at the Black American experience, sort of using the same math. So if we look at the early colonial period and enslavement, we're starting at 1619. Now, this is based off of the documented history that we have. There's a lot more research that is being unveiled and a lot more research that we're also going to do and investigate and interrogate when it comes to some of these facts that we have. But for the purpose of this, we're going to use 1619 sort of as the baseline, because that was whenever the first receipts for slaves being bought and sold during the transatlantic slave trade here in America on the coast of Virginia. So from 1619 until 1865, that is whenever the 13th Amendment was ratified and it abolished slavery. So then that would be 246 years of slavery, just uninterrupted slavery. Then we go to Reconstruction and Civil Rights, starting at, again, 1865. Then we go to 1968. That would be one of the three civil rights bills during that time. 1963 was the Voting Rights Act that allowed African Americans and people of color to be able to vote. So then we have 103 years of Reconstruction during civil rights, because that was kind of around the same time, even though I know they're kind of two completely different eras. But when it comes to not being able to have access to a lot of different things, Jim Crow, segregation, racial terror, all those things, those can be kind of lumped into one era. Now, of course, these eras, we can definitely have a conversation about them. But that's how I'm framing it here, just because of the things that was going on during that time. Then we reach this time of the post-civil rights era that started in 1968. And I am the one to believe that it ended in 2012. Okay, so that's about 44 years. And the reason why I have the post-civil rights era going from 1968, after the Voting Rights Act, of course, the desegregation had ended, housing regulations and accommodations had ended. Affirmative action was a conversation that started happening during that time. And so we were in this post-civil rights era after that. And 2012 is when I feel that that's when the shift kind of stopped there. And it all points to the election of Barack Obama. When President Barack Obama was elected in 2008, that's when we were supposed to be in a post-racial America, which, of course, this era would be called something different, maybe starting at that time. But then around 2010, we had this small group called the Tea Party, which was a political movement that started coming up and started taking some seats in the Senate and in the House and for Congress. Then in 2012, it shifted. And then that's whenever some things started happening. And then in 2012, that was whenever the murder of Trayvon Martin happened, which then gets us to the next era, which is the Black Lives Matter and racial backlash era. Now, there might be some scholars, there might be some folks that would like to have some conversation that might want to dispute this. I'm definitely open to having those conversations. But for the purpose of this and the research that I've done, Black Lives Matter and racial backlash deserves its own category as far as era that we lived through. Because after the murder of Trayvon Martin, then we had Eric Garner, we had Michael Brown, we had Sandra Bland, we had a list, Tamir Rice, we had a list of African Americans who were dying at the hands of police officers, and we were witnessing these things via camera, protests. It was almost like the rebirth of the civil rights movement was happening again for Black Americans and worldwide, just Black people throughout the diaspora, trying to understand this discriminatory actions that was happening at the hands of the police. But then it also brought up other discriminatory practices within society during that time. But also when it came to Black Lives Matter, there was some racial backlash as far as all lives matter, blue lives matter, and the like. That wasn't to say, Black Lives Matter. Its goal was not to demean or take down anybody, the value of anybody else's life. It was just to try to be as equal as the other groups. But racial backlash is something that did happen during that time. And I have that tracking roughly around 2012 until 2025, which is about 13 years, especially during the height of the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, when the death of George Floyd happened. The summer of racial reckoning happened. That did a lot of things during that time for the folks that do remember what that time was like. Then we had DEI and these conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But then even with that, that's whenever critical race theory, if some of you guys remember that, started kind of bubbling up in Virginia, just to call it out, and sort of this redirecting of what history and what should be taught and not taught to our children during that time. And then in 2025, that's whenever we have the new administration that we have right now, which eliminated a lot of the civil rights bills and acts, reversed a lot of the DEI things. And this what brings us to now, from 2025 until now. So right now, based off of the research and the moments that's happened, we are in a new time in our experience. So now if we go to the Black American wealth gap, okay, so because remember, we're talking about wealth and dollars. So then let's just look at how the wealth gap was, where it started from a numerical standpoint. So if we look at the early colonial period and enslavement, it was about 56 to 1. That equals to $1 for every white household, to about 2 cents. Now, the reason why the 2 cents is even up here, even though chattel slavery, no human that was a slave at the time could actually have or gain any wealth. But there were some free Blacks that escaped to the north and was able to get businesses and have careers and different things like that. Of course, what's that famous book and became a movie? Some of you guys are probably going to tell me in the chat about the gentleman who got kidnapped from the north and was sit down and he wrote his story about it. I'm drawing a blank right now. You guys know I know it. Put it in the chat. I'm pretty sure I'll probably provide this somewhere later, but right now I'm just drawing a blank. So then we go to Reconstruction and Civil Rights era. So roughly around that, we had 20. So we definitely cut a bit of it like down a lot during that time, because that's whenever Black folks were able to have their own farms, jobs, businesses. Of course, the height of Black Wall Street was coming around that time. So we was able to cut into that military as well. So 23 to 1. So that's $1 to 4 cents by 1870. So 5 years after the 13th Amendment. Then we have 10 to 1, which is $1 to 10 cents by the 1920s. Then we cut it down to 7 to 1. So for $1 to 14 cents in the 1950s. Now, when we talk about the post-civil rights era, roughly 16 to 1 across the modern post-civil rights era, which is $1 to 16 cents or to 17 cents. And then when we go down here to the Black Lives Matter era all the way to 2026, it's approximately, 6 to 1. So roughly $1 to, it could be between 15 cents or 17 cents up to there. Or if we're using $100, for every $100 a white household has, then a Black household has between $15 to $17. this is also only to black and white wealth, because the other races, as far as the Hispanics and Asian races and multiracial groups, were not counted for when it comes to wealth or even towards the census until the early to mid 1900s or 20th century. So the data for them wasn't even something that we can look this far back on. So then when we look down here at, sort of looking back at the generational mathematics, so we have 7 to 8 generations lived under total wealth exclusion. That was during slavery. 2 to 3 generations lived under partial or blocked access. That would be segregation, terror, and redlining. So then 1 to 2 generations have had legal but still unequal access to wealth building tools. So across these 12 generations, the equal access to America's major wealth building system is extremely recent and unequal outcomes. This is taken from a journal of economics that was published in 2024, The Wealth of Two Nations, the U.S. Racial Wealth Gap from 1860 until 2020. This information will be provided to you. So just let you know, I'm sourcing everything that I'm looking up from independent resources. So these things will be shared in the show notes. So that means you can go and do your own homework. I'm not just making these numbers up at all. So then moving on. So what was built and then what was destroyed? So we have an economist, William A. Darty, was cited that the estimated placing of the present value of property loss from the Tulsa race massacre at more than $600 million. Now, for some of you guys, you should know about the Tulsa race massacre now. This was in the Greenwood district when Tulsa was a thriving Black community during segregated Jim Crow America, but the town was destroyed, bombed. Hundreds of thousands of people were displaced and murdered during that time. And so they did a commission to sort of estimate how much it would be. And this economist said it was about $600 million. Now, Greenwood was also part of a larger group of communities around the United States that were also Black Wall Streets. And one's in Durham, North Carolina, one's in New Orleans, Harlem, Chicago, different places like that. But then even during those times, there was policies, not only just the violence, but then also other policies that destroyed these thriving Black communities. For instance, in the Durham-Haytide district was cut in half by a highway. Okay, Paradise Valley in Detroit was bulldozed. Now, some of these were not by accidents. Okay, these were policy choices. And the wealth that was destroyed in these communities were never replaced or repaid. So it's not that Black people or African Americans were not building wealth after slavery. We went straight to work. The thing is, though, every time that a Black community was growing and thriving, it was either taken by violence or by political power. Now, if we take this 500 million and use it solely as a illustrative benchmark, right, across just 11, now we're just taking 11 historical Black business districts, that would result to exceed probably $6.6 billion of value right now in the United States. Now, that's only 11. There are way more than 11 Black business districts throughout the United States. And that's something that we'll definitely be talking about as we go through this generational impact project, because this is all information. This is all things that we're trying to do and bring to light. So that means we're all educated, right? So again, this is just an illustration based off of the numbers from William Darty, who was on the PBS show back in 2021. Again, right after the Summer Racial Reckoning, when DEI was in style at the time, to at least bring this to light. Now, the price of the gap, right? Now, this is some additional information. According to Citigroup, systematic racism and discrimination against Black Americans cost the U.S. economy approximately $16 trillion over the past 2 decades. And Citi also estimates that closing the key racial gaps today could add $5 trillion to the U.S. GDP over the next 5 years. Now, this article was written in 2020, and when they were talking about the 16 trillion, they used 1984 all the way up until 2020, I believe, was their estimation in it. Again, this will be all in the show notes where you guys can read this yourself. And there was, some very large components that added to the $16 trillion that was lost by the U.S. economy, right? So this right here illustrates that this is not just a black problem, right? Or Black American problem or African American problem. This is an American economic issue that is having by not allowing Black people and African Americans, who is the oldest or one of the oldest racial and ethnic groups. I'm going to say ethnic groups. Black people and Black Americans, we're identified as a race, but not an ethnic group. But when you look at the word ethnicity and what ethnicity is, Black Americans definitely can fit into that. And that's why that there is this conversation around the foundational Black Americans right now. I hear you guys out there online talking about it. And that is something that we will definitely discuss as we're going through this process and providing more information and engaging and interrogating what it is that we're finding. But looking at these 4 components, 13 trillion from discriminatory lending to Black entrepreneurs, meaning can't get any money to start your businesses, grow your businesses, and scale. 2.7 trillion in lost wages. That could be just the gap between how much a white person makes compared to a Black person, or unpaid wages just overall. 218 billion from housing credit discrimination. And then 90 to 113 billion from education access barriers, meaning getting access to education, scholarships, and a lot of African Americans and Black people being in student loan debt. Now, down here, it does say separately. Okay, let me pull this back up. Separately, McKinsey estimates that the racial wealth gap could cost the U.S. economy, 1 to 1.5 trillion between 2019 and 2028. So we do a little bit of math right there, because that's about 9 years. That means that'd be 9 to $13.5 trillion. And as you can see at the bottom here, the Citigroup article was written in 2020. McKinsey was written in 2019. So these were done. I mean, the McKinsey was done before COVID even occurred and before the death of George Floyd. They'd even started having this conversation. But the conversation about generational wealth within the Black community has been going on for about a decade now. What COVID and what the Summer Racial Reckoning and Black Lives Matter did is it really created this powder keg event to then have these discussions about wealth and why are we having a seat at the table. So now if we look at the total racial wealth gap as it looks like today, or at least from the Federal Reserve that I got this information from, Federal Reserve 2022 Survey of Consumer Financing. Let me go ahead and make this a little bit bigger for you guys. So this is looking at all of the racial groups in the United States. So then as you can see, kind of going from left to right, all the way to the right is the Black household. So the median family wealth is estimated at, let's round it up to $45,000. Okay. And then we go to the Hispanic household. Their median family wealth is 61.6 or $62,000. Then we have people the group that identifies as other or multiracial groups, which is $63,000. Then we go over here to the median white family household, which is $285,000. And then the median family wealth of Asian Americans, which is $536,000. So, as illustrated, Black families have the lowest median wealth among all the racial groups, shown that's tracked by the Federal Reserve. The disparity is stark. This means that, again, going back to the earlier figure that we have, that for every $100 held by a white family, black families hold approximately $16. If you equate it to the Asian household, because Asian households are doubling white households, then it's $8. So black households have $8 to every $100 of wealth held by Asian families. When we look at the other multiracial groups, it's about $71. And then to the Hispanics, it's about $73. Again, comparing it to the $100 that they have there and looking at the history and the things that Black Americans have had and gone through and fought for, to be at the bottom is a pretty stark reality. Now, this is just to show like the black dollar in 2026 and the buying power, right? So it is projected that the black buying power would reach $2.1 trillion. Now, that is roughly equal to the entire GDP of Australia. There'll be some information about this as well, which is astonishing, to say the least, that the black buying power, as far as how the buying power moves the markets, can equate to the GDP of an entire nation. So black consumer buying power is a formidable economic force with significant opportunities for growth and investments, but the economic conversion, it doesn't convert. The math ain't mathing, as they say. So in 2023, approximately 201,000 black-owned employer businesses represented 3.4% of the U.S. employer firms and generated $249 billion in receipts. Now, when we talk, just pause here for a moment. So when we talk about employer businesses, we're talking about people who got W-2s. Now, when it comes to the 1099s and solopreneurs within the black community, tons of those. But in order to have the payroll to then have W-2s where there's taxes taken out, life insurance or health insurance and different things like that, that is paid from the employer on behalf of the employee, there's black employer businesses only represent 3.4%. That goes back to that over $100 trillion of discriminatory practices when it comes to lending for black-owned businesses in order to get it. But then even if we look down here at the bottom with this fine print right over here, black founders received a mere 0.32% of all U.S. venture capital funding in 2025. That is even a decrease from what we got in 2021, which is 1.5%, meaning that in 2021, that 1.5% of venture capital funding to go to black founders and businesses, it's less than 2%. But then 4 years later, we went backwards. We now are less than 1%, 0.32% of any venture capital. And I haven't done the research on this, but I'm going to put a strong guess that the majority of that 0.32% of venture capitalists probably came from black venture capitalist firms. Now, the economic power is real. The challenge is converting more of that activity into black-owned business to scale investments, capital assets, and transferable wealth. So we have the economic power to support businesses, to shift markets, to create trends, but it's not converting into ownership of businesses or IP. Now, where does this lead us? Okay, so now we have the trauma of the economic injustice and the things that sort of just illustrated a little bit about that. But we have the historical trauma, the emotional wounds passed down through generations from slavery, displacement, and exclusion that we have. The financial trauma, the fear, the anxiety, or emotional deregulations related to money due to chronic poverty and instability. And then the cultural displacements, the loss of land, the neighborhoods, the businesses, the connections to heritage through systematic erasure. So these are all things that can be pointed to what is the experience of Black Americans and what we've gone through. So this is not something that we can say we just gave up, that we didn't try. This whole narrative about Black Americans being lazy. It's not true. It's just not true. There are lazy people, but to say that a whole race of folks is there, that's part of that media literacy that we will definitely be covering in the Generational Impact Project. Now, looking at systematic barriers and internalized beliefs, the mistrust of systems. We have the deep skepticism of financial, legal, educational, healthcare institutions due to historical harms. And then internalized inferiority, the internalization of social and economic messages that can connect personal worth, racial status, and visible markers of success. And not saying that everybody has this. There might be several of you people that are out there that are Black who do not identify with either the trauma or the barriers that have happened, right? There has definitely have been some success stories. There's a lot of folks out there that are doing very well for themselves. But for a vast majority, based off of the data that we have, these are some of the things that are happening that we would like to sort of address in order for the correct contributions of Black money and wealth to help out the United States. Because Black Americans, we are American. We just want to have a fair shot, and the overall betterment of the society will go up. So now we have to go to this one part. Now, there's some additional research that is being done on this study right here, but this is where the science gets into it, right? The epigenetic stress, the biological legacy of trauma, right? So this is the chronic stress from systematic injustice becomes biologically embedded and reaches subsequent generations through multiple pathways, which include biological, familiar, social, and structural. So essentially what this is talking about is how trauma is transferred through the DNA to the children and to the offspring. It's not changing up the DNA itself, but it is changing up some of the markers. So in theory, if somebody was to go to war, let's say a man went to war, right now we're in a conflict right now, somebody observes something that is very traumatic that happens over in the Middle East, they come home, they already have a wife, or they get a wife, or they get a partner, they have a child, the stress and the hormones that they have will be transferred into their child. And this is something that is still being researched. This is something that's still being covered to this day. So we will definitely bring on some experts to really kind of talk about this and to see if this is something, but this part of the epigenetic stress and the biological layers of trauma is something that is just human, right? We are of the human race. We are all of the human race. So we all deal with some of the things that are being discussed here. But when you look at the experiences of a particular people that have had to deal with historically the trauma that our group has gone through, this sort of makes complete and total sense. All right. So then now we get to the Generational Impact Project, right? So the Generational Impact Project is a comprehensive journey to wealth, healing, and community, right? This is our answer to this data. And this is only just a little bit of what it is that we're covering, right? There's so much more. We are offering free community conversations, talking about key themes, having panel discussions, but also we have our cohort. And that's where we get down to the nitty gritty, because this is not the Generational Impact Live program that you're seeing right now, or even our newsletter. Those are just touch points. Those are just providing information and resources to the public at large. But where the work is in the learning modules. And so we're putting together a cohort and we have workshops developed to tackle this. And so for our inaugural cohort right now, we're starting it in September. So that's in a couple of weeks. Right now, applications are open to go through a 9-month immersive program with financial and wellness specialists, right? We will have some live virtual workshops. We'll have ongoing mentorships and also community support. And with this, we're also going to be measuring the impact of where you are when you first start this program and then where you're at the end, right? So this is not just us providing you information and having these discussions and having opinions. We're using fact-based information, reliable, good practices and habits to build in order for us to really build this wealth. But we have to start with what triggers us, the family issues, the community sort of dynamics that we have. Look at those things, especially when you look at the Black American experience. Over half of our existence in this country was under slavery. 246 years. Remember, then 103 years of Reconstruction and Civil Rights, 44 years of the post-civil rights, then another 13 years, I believe I said. So when you look at just slavery, 250 years, we're not even close to even going to that. And some of us in our lifetime won't even be alive enough to see what an equal part of being enslaved and not enslaved is going to look like, because the Black American is an enculturated community. Those are just facts. And the other Black folks around the diaspora, which this is not a diaspora war. If you're trying to have that conversation, this is not, well, we can have a conversation about the diaspora, but when it comes to the diaspora wars that's going on, it's just part of the same game that is keeping us where we're not even having a seat at the table or being able to even build our own table. So how do you want to go ahead and be a part of this? There's 4 connected spaces that we have. Depending on where you're viewing this at, depending on where you're looking at this from, we have different ways to do it. As I said before, we are doing the cohort in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. That includes Washington, D.C. and all of the different districts and areas of Washington, D.C. that there are, all the neighborhoods, Southern Maryland, which include Prince George's County and Montgomery County, and then Northern Virginia, which include Alexandria, Arlington, Prince William, Fairfax, Loudoun County, so on and so forth, around in all the towns and different communities within that area. So that's what we're covering here. But if you're not in the area and you definitely want to be engaged, then, please, you can be part of it by subscribing to our Generational Impact Journal. This is our curated newsletter that we have insights, research, resources that we'll be delivering every 2 weeks to get you to think deeper. We'll have practices and things that you can go ahead and employ into your life on your own. But we're going to definitely provide that. The Generational Impact Live. This is what you're looking at right now. This is where we'll be having conversations right now. This is the first episode. So I'm providing this information to you because you guys want to know what the Generational Impact Project is and why are we doing this. But I'll be bringing on some special guests and some colleagues to have deeper conversations, some presentations, and at some point, hopefully make this into a live stream to where we can actually have dialogue. And if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please share them with us. Please send them in at generationalimpactproject@gmail.com. And then we're going to be having these community conversations throughout the Washington, D.C. metro area. These are going to be free public dialogue, resource sharing, and community informed learning. These will be more in person. So please come out if you are in the area. And then, of course, our inaugural cohort, which is our 9-month financial and healing education module that we will be doing. Now, to get a little bit more in depth as far as our inaugural cohort that is starting in September. So just to give you a little bit more behind the scenes. So this is our interactive 9-month program that runs from September 6th through June 2027, guiding participants through a transformative journey of healing, education, and legacy building. There will be a holiday break during the December 2026 because it is Christmas. Nobody's trying to mess up with y'all's Kwanzaa, your Hanukkahs, whatever it is that you celebrate during that time. We're not trying to deal with that, but we will have something hopefully that will set you up to navigate that space, because it can be a very expensive, it can be a very stressful time. So we do have something in our programming that will address this. So during our phase 1, when you're in the cohort, please apply. Applications are open. Is the foundation healing. That's from September until November 2026. As I said before, taking December off. Then phase 2, growth and impact. That will be from January until June 2027. This is designed for a cohort between 25 and 40 participants within the Washington, D.C. metro area. And the reason why I say 25 to 40, because we don't want it to be too big. I've been doing this sort of work for a while. And once you get above a certain number, then we can't touch everybody. We can't support everybody. But with 40, that is manageable. We're able to make sure that everybody is engaged. We're able to track everybody, and it's just more manageable, especially based off of the manpower that we have and the funding that we have right now. 40 is now. Could we eventually go to a much larger class? Yes, but for right now, we're just going to cap it at 40. This is a paid program. So we're looking roughly for the 9-month program, $3,000 for the full tuition, or you could pay $375 per month. Now, this gets you access to our instructors. That's part of the workshop. That's part of materials. So with this, you investing in this, how this will be able to help you grow and better spend your money, and also your relationship with money. This is a pretty fair deal and price compared to the other things that's out there. And again, applications are open. The URL is right there, which we will have in the show notes. So if you want to be a part of this work, join the cohort. Applications are open. Please apply, subscribe and share the GIP live show, and also our journal. We'll have information for you to be able to sign up. If you're looking at this on either Fanbase or YouTube, just subscribe, get the notification bell whenever we release our episodes. You'll be the first to know. Also, if you're part of our Generational Impact Journal email list, you'll be getting that information because we just started our Substack. So you can find us on Substack right now. That's also where we're going to be housing our journal. But if you're part of this community and you're part of our email list, then you will get notified first. For the people for Substack, you'll just be getting it a little bit later. But if you want to know when the first episodes, some of the first research, and some of our guest columnists, goodness gracious, sorry, our featured writers, probably should have said that. When our featured writers come and provide their information, then you'll be the first to know. Also, you can sponsor a seat. If you're a part of an organization, if you know somebody who can really benefit from this, then you can get a sponsorship or sponsor them to be a part of this program, whether you work at a bank, a financial institution, a nonprofit, whatever. If there's a community out there that you want to serve and you want them to be a part of this, go ahead and sponsor a seat for them and then get them engaged. Or another part is if you're in the Washington, D.C. area now, we can also do community conversations virtually. So just please email us, generationalimpactproject@gmail.com. And there is a virtual component where we can have a presentation, a conversation, and engage with your community about this. The in-person, that will be in the Washington, D.C. area, and then our cohort will be. But we definitely want to engage with all the communities throughout the United States and eventually around the world. So that brings us to the end. Okay. So I appreciate the time that you have provided me to speak to you, to give you the rundown of what the Generational Impact Project is. I'm super excited that we were able to get this first episode out the way. We do have some issues of the Generational Impact Journal already live, and you can go to the Substack. Just look up Generational Impact Project. We're on all the social medias, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn, Michael Anthony. You can also go to our website, generationalimpactproject.com, to find out more information. And also our physical sponsor, we'd like to thank them, Webb's Training Center, for providing their leadership and their guidance through this. And with this physical sponsor, with you donating or providing some funding for this program, it is tax deductible. So just to let you know that, and we're just super excited to get this thing started. So I will go ahead and let you guys go. I appreciate your time. Thank you, and looking forward to engaging with you on this in the future. Peace.